majestically together. Just think about then when we're surrounded by 10,000 times 10,000 angels, and we're in that mighty chorus. Just goosebumps. It is so good to be together today. I had mentioned in the announcement, there's a husband and wife, neat people. They're not actually members of our congregation. But what we thought about is, what can we do to help them? And so I thought about this lesson of benevolence. That just means doing something good. And I thought about it from the standpoint of loving better. What can we do to help others as they're in a difficult time? You say, Paul, you're preaching this because you're wanting more money. Not a dime comes to me. There's no carrying charge. There's no transfer fee. They get every bit that there is. Well, you're doing that here so this congregation has more financial benefit. Not a dime comes to this congregation. It goes to, they were members here, husband and wife, Dave and Christy Garner, and now they worship in a little congregation in Enumclaw. As a background to it, and a number of you got an email on it, he changed jobs. The new employer says, look, not a problem, you'll make the same amount. Didn't, like 33% less, and they just got hammered. And this part is taken care of. They were behind in their mortgage 3 months. Enumclaw took care of that. And said, wow. And so there were car payment and regular bills, credit cards, such as that. So we thought, well, maybe we can help out, but help out on an individual basis. And so as I think about that kind of thing, I think about the greatest commands. Now, it's interesting to me that Jews in their tabulation, and according to JewishVirtualLibrary.org, and it's commonly said the Jews historically noted that there were 613 laws in the Old Testament for Jews to obey. 365 positive, 248 negative. That's not significant one way or the other, just kind of in passing of interest. But it sets the background for the question that was asked Jesus. A Pharisee, one who was a lawyer. So this guy is particular about all the little details of the law. He's got a great background, recording the verbal law of the Jews and such as that, and knowing all the nuances. This lawyer asked, which is the greatest command? So I know all about the commands and all these other things. So here's over 600 laws. Which one's the greatest law? And you know the answer to that. Jesus says, Matthew 22:37, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the greatest and foremost command. When you take all the laws there are, Old Testament sacrifice and wearing tassels on your clothes and unleavened bread and all these things, he said, you take them, and thou shalt not commit murder. And he said the greatest of all them is you put God number one in your heart. He said, that's what you're really doing. He said, and he wasn't asked this, but he said, the second is like unto it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And that helps sometimes as we see somebody in a difficult situation and it strikes, maybe we've not been through it, and it doesn't strike us as heavily. And we say, well, I think they just, shrug it off or whatever. But if you've been through that, you appreciate the turmoil. One of the Christians here this morning came up to me before most people had gotten here and gave me some money for the gardeners. And he said, I know what it's like. I've been through it 3 times through no fault of my own. I go, wow. It's just thrilling. And so when we think about helping others, that is, if I was in their position and I exhausted all my capability to help and somebody else stepped up, why, it blows us away. And so when we think about benevolence from the standpoint of loving better, one of the things I appreciate, in fact, in this lesson, there's nothing new. Probably there's nothing, because, man, I never heard of such a principle before. It's just stuff maybe we haven't all put together. And in the Old Testament, they really had that same law of love. In Deuteronomy 15, verse 7 and following, if there's a poor man with you, one of your brothers, in any of the towns in your land, you shall not harden your heart, nor close your hand. You're not getting any, Martin boys, I tell you what. He said, don't do that. He said, open your hand. You shall freely open your hand to him and generously lend. And I thought that word was interesting because actually in this particular verse carries that idea of lending, pawning. And that if someone's not coming up and says, look, I just lost my farm, I need your farm. Okay, you got my farm. You're not saying that, but let's say just drought or theft or something else, and somebody said, I need so much seed. And here's a brother says, we're going to help you out. And generously lend him sufficient for his need in whatever he lacks. And you shall generously give to him, and your heart shall not be grieved when you, all right, man, you get it, but man, don't be the grump. And the Lord will bless you in all your work. That's what God said even in Old Testament times, and I thought it was neat. Psalm 112:9. They share freely and give generously to those in need. Their good deeds will be remembered forever, and they will have influence and honor. I think back, as I read that this past week, I thought about, in the New Testament, we'll talk about in a little bit, Barnabas in Acts chapter 4, he sold a piece of land. Think about that. 2,000 years later, we're still appreciating what that brother did, just to help other Christians. You go, because that's really so. It isn't, in fact, in chapter 5, you find some people that were giving to try to get a name and a reputation, and everybody would say, woo, Ananias and Sapphira, man, they paid the penalty. But the individual that just had that open heart, you think, wow, how amazing that is. So there's the greatest command, and they observed that in the Old Testament. In fact, they had, I'll just say, a Old Testament program to help the poor. And Leviticus chapter 9, down in verse 9 and 10, when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap to the very corners of your field. Neither shall you gather the gleanings. All right, man, we lost 3 seeds back there. We're going to vacuum every last. Nobody gets nothing. I get it all. I like this picture because you see here's a crew of guys out there harvesting the grain and the barley. And some of it falls down. He said, and beside that, when you get to the corner, don't try to get the very last seed. Just leave a little bit there. And he says, you shall not glean your vineyard. You get the first one, all right, let's get every last grape. There's got to be something left. We're going to get it. Nor shall you gather the fallen fruit of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the needy and for the stranger. God had a plan for poor people. And I thought it was interesting here. The farmers were to make it available, but the poor had to invest their own effort to get it. The farmers didn't have to gather it all and then start going throughout the community and say, look, we're trying to find somebody. How much can we give you? And you don't have to get off the sofa. That there was a mutuality of effort in there that struck me. And then we see, even when believers gave in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, it was to be with a great attitude. In Proverbs 3 and in verse 27, do not withhold good from those to whom it is due when it is in your power to do it. And then he adds in verse 28, do not say to your neighbor, go and come back tomorrow and I'll give it. When you have it with you. Just see me tomorrow. And I get to hold on for one more day. But the reality is, it's manipulative. It's demeaning. You're just grinding that person. In 2 Corinthians 8, 1 and 2, regarding the churches of Macedonia. So here's the churches just in Europe. in the northern part that were really noted not for being the wealthy area. They were really hammered financially. And Paul tells Corinth about how the churches of Macedonia, that in great ordeal of affliction, they were undergoing persecution, and abundance of their joy, they were so thankful to be Christians, and their deep poverty. That's a specific word in the Greek. It's not that they were a little short this week. They were grinding in poverty. But look at their attitude. It overflowed to the wealth of their liberality. Well, how did that work out? According to their ability and beyond their ability. You can't afford that. Why don't you just keep it? No, it's important to me. They gave of their own accord. They weren't coerced into doing it. Notice Paul says, begging us for the favor of participation in support of the saints. You go, huh? Look at that. They said, you don't have enough. What you need to do is go home and say, look, it's not going to make that big a difference. We hardly have anything already. We're going to be fine. God is going to take care of us. And here just a couple weeks ago, we had a visitor come and wanted to make we tell our visitors, so glad to have you here. Leave a visitor card. We're not asking for a contribution. That's from among the members here. But here was one. He said, you're a little congregation. You could use it more than where we are. In fact, what they said was, we're going to put you in an automatic thing. We want you to have a donation from us for the rest of my life. And they're not a member here. Wow. Wow. One person said, nobody ever got poor by giving too much. And so here were people that are already poor. But they knew of individuals that were being hammered, not only in their congregation, they're given to people not even in their country. They're not even given in the same continent, because Macedonia is Europe, and for Middle East and beyond is a part of a different continent. Wow. They said, we want to help Christians. And that's what people have said here. And how amazing that is. Benevolence in loving better, that we see that Christians not only gave, but with amazing generosity. In Acts chapter 2:45, where the church was just started, and Luke records for us, and they began selling their possessions, property and possessions, and were sharing them with all as anyone has need. It wasn't like, hey man, I got twice as much as you now. It's just, no, these people were hurting. They came, they heard the gospel, they're converted, and they don't have funds, and we're willing to help. And like the reference I made earlier in Acts 4:36, Joseph, a Levite of Cyprian birth, who was called Barnabas by the apostles. So here is a person of Jewish heritage. Interestingly, I don't know that's particularly significant, but of Levitical, in the priestly line under the Jewish religion. His name really was Joseph, but his attitude was so encouraging to everybody, the apostles gave him a nickname. Man, you are the encourager. In fact, if you had Mr. and Mrs. Encouragement getting married and they had a kid, you would be the one. We're calling you the son of encouragement. And he owned a tract of land and sold it and brought the money and laid it at the apostles' feet. Wow. He had a piece of property. What was his thought? Well, not doing me any good anyhow. I just got a bunch of weeds on it and I didn't have any real. It just came to me. It was a little side deal here. And some people could benefit from that. And he just had a wonderful and generous attitude. So in the idea of benevolence and loving better, the biggest deal isn't the biggest amount. What you're looking at in this graphic comes from Luke chapter 21, verse 2. Jesus, saw a poor widow put in 2 very small copper coins, New International Version. Now, mites is that's translated in a King James and various other ones. And Jesus comments, because here in the court of the women, there were collection vessels that kind of had a narrow opening and then a broader base, and people would put in their coins. And so you could sit there and see, if somebody's putting in a lot, And some were putting in large amounts. And what you're looking at in this graphic is two tiny little things. You can say, man, it's just the width of the base of your fingers, hardly anything. And it was the smallest coins then used among the Jews. And Jesus said, this woman has put in more than them all. Why? Because she put in everything she had. Well, if you're a poor widow and that's the last you got, why would you give it? Let me ask you, what does 2 cents buy anymore? Like nothing. I mean, young people in the olden days, they used to have candy bars for a nickel. And so if you got 2 cents, hey, that's going to save me from starvation. I don't know if you can buy anything for 2 cents anymore. You may say, I found something. But in general, everything is $1.79 or whatever. And she said, it's not going to help me at all. I'm going to give what I have to God. It just is what it is. How impressive is that? In Acts 11:29, in the northern end of Palestine, way up there in Antioch, actually into the land of Syria, it comments how the disciples, each according to his ability, people have different abilities. Some have a lot, some have a little, maybe some have nothing, decided to send help or relief to the brothers in Judea. And so here were people that says, you know what, that's family down there, and we're going to help. And people have different amounts that they can help with. And so what we're going to do at the end of services, if you want to help Dave and Christy, I'll be out in the foyer. You can help. It's not required. You can go out different entrances if you want. It's just, if it works for you, fine. If it doesn't, fine. This is just an opportunity to help if you like. No requirements whatsoever. And you may not be able to, and that's fine. There'll be another time to help people. Matthew 10:42. Whoever in the name of a disciple, you're doing it because you're a believer, not because I'm going to get a tax write-off because they're going to write me up in the Rotary for, good works. In the name of a disciple, gives to one of these little ones a cup of cold water to drink, shall not lose his reward. He said, it's not the amount, just the willingness of heart. That struck me. In Luke 3:11, whoever has 2 tunics, what we'd say is a long shirt, and God's Word's translation just says, whoever has 2 shirts, let him share with he who has none. And food likewise. So you're just looking at, hey, I got extra shirts, I got extra socks. That aspect, that's just willingness to share. In Matthew 9:13, Jesus said, go and learn what this means. I desire compassion and not sacrifice. Well, God did desire sacrifice, but not just sacrifice only. Not sacrifice because it was more important than a caring, giving, loving heart. He said, that aspect, do I want to obey God? God, I don't have all that much, but you have my heart, and I'm willing to love and to serve. Benevolence as an element of loving better really will also include wisdom in your giving. In Proverbs 14:33, that I don't actually quote all the time, but I quote lots and lots, is where the writer says, wisdom lies in the heart of the one who has understanding. I don't care what it is that you're doing, a little research is going to help you. I don't care if you're giving to people, if you're buying a car, selling your house, doing something on the internet. Use good judgment. Seek the background. What information do I need about that? And it's going to be a blessing. Another one we cite is Matthew 10 and verse 16. Be as wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Get your information. Don't be dumb as a dove and sneaky as a snake. That's the reverse of it. What can we do? Have good judgment. All right, that's not a good purchase or a good website or a good person, whatever it is. And then Proverbs 9 verse 12 that I like, he said, if you're wise for yourself. You're going to be blessed because you make good judgments. You're going to bless others because you're using discretion. So an application of that, one of the things you think about if you're going to help somebody, are they caught up in sin? I'm not saying do they ever commit a sin. Everybody fails. James 3 and verse 2, my brethren, in many things we all stumble. If the Lord's brother says we all foul up, it's not like, oh, that person did one thing wrong. That Linda, we got to watch her. Linda, wheel at it. No, everybody makes mistakes. And in fact, one of the brothers, it was among others, one of the elders we had here, Rocky Wells, wonderful guy. So mellow, so good, so loving, so giving and everything. And in his prayers, he would ask, God, forgive us our sins. And I would think, how could that guy ever do anything wrong? It just is such a neat guy. But the reality, nobody is flawless. But we're talking about somebody that is caught up in it, deliberate, and continuous. 1 Timothy 5:22, Paul said, do not share in or be partaker in other men's sin. If another person is actively caught up in drug addiction or alcoholism or whatever, do you want to support that habit? No. And so you try to think about, is this going to a good cause? Do I have confidence in that? And then sometimes, are they willing to work? 2 Thessalonians 3:10, Paul said, if they will not work, neither let them eat. Long time ago, I was preaching in Sumner, and there was a brother in Christ that wasn't exactly on the right track. In fact, he was way off the track, and he wanted to get some help from the Christians. And at that time, I and a couple other brothers were helping the congregation sort through and get the right information for helping different people. And I had done my homework. And so this guy had come, and we'd met with him, and he wanted some help in whatever it was, rent or something. And I said, well, what about asking your family? He said, oh, no, that wouldn't work. They wouldn't give me anything. I said, I know, I already asked them. And he said, what they said about you is they'll help your family, but you are a gold brick. They wouldn't help you at all. That's what's whoa, because they knew this guy, and he just wasn't doing his part. He finally shaped up and got a job and so forth. So you want to know, are you really interested in serving God, or are you just playing a game? Are they takers and not givers? I am struck by Proverbs 30 and in verse 15. He says, the leech has two daughters. They both have the same name. Give and give. And we're sucking all the blood out, and you get nothing. And so I said, well, that's pretty graphic. So you try to think about, is the person interested in being part of a family and giving and sharing, but also willing to receive, but not it just flow one way? And then are they a Christian, or is it general public? Now, it's not that you can't help others. In Galatians 6 and verse 10, that our attitude is we ought to do good to all men, especially those of the household of faith. So I said, most importantly, and particularly, you make sure Christians are doing well. And a scripture we're going to use in the next slide, or two slides from now, Matthew 25 and verse 40. Inasmuch as you did it to one of these, the least of my brethren, you did it to me. So we all feel, if you help my kids, you've helped me. I mean, you get 6 gold stars. And so, because it means so much. So what, as individuals, you can do anything you want with your money, right? You can give it to the Red Cross, Bubba Louie's Bubble Gum Contest. You can do anything you want with your money. But as part of the congregation, we're more limited. It can't just be anybody and anything. And I thought about this past week, about the hungry and the homeless and the disadvantaged in other countries. India has about 1.4 billion people, and about 1 billion of them are in poverty. Well, just help them. With that in India, that's a quarter of Earth's population. India and Africa, it's beyond our capability to help. But there are individuals that you can help, and as an individual, you can help whoever that you wish. Just do it wisely. In giving benevolence and loving better, one of the things that's helpful is to realize ultimately all things belong to God. In Deuteronomy in chapter 10 and down in verse 14, the writer says, "To the Lord your God belong the heavens and the highest heaven." And so I like this graphic of the universe. Well, we're in Earth and our little solar system and Milky Way galaxy, and off to the right there is Andromeda Galaxy, at least in this graphic. You know, there's thousands upon thousands and thousands of galaxies. In the constellation Virgo, there's part of its construction. It's just what man says, okay, here's an outline of stars, we're going to give it a name. There's 2,000 galaxies as part of that particular formation. Wow. God says, I own them all. I don't care how far. When we talk about the edge of the visible universe, we're not talking about the edge of the universe. We have no idea where the edge of the universe is. We're talking about as far out we can see, there's still more galaxies. And they're speeding up. You go, wow. God said, yep, own that. Throne room of God, angels, I own everything. And then in Psalm 24 and verse 1, the earth is the Lord's, and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. Me and you, everybody. Yeah, but see, I got my little account here. God said, yeah, I understand. You got that little account. And where is it you live? Well, in this tiny little city here, up in the Pacific Northwest and outside of people in the Northwest, and a few people are in there. People have never even heard of it. And in a country that is not the biggest country on earth, for this little span of time, 80 years. Let me back up. Haggai 2 and in verse 8, he says, the gold is mine and the silver is mine. Well, who created it? How did it get here anyhow? Well, yeah, but I got this little handful in my hand. He said, yeah, fair enough, but I know where it came from. And then finally, Psalm 50, 10, 11. Every animal of the forest is mine. So I thought, well, every bear, black bear, grizzly bear, brown bear, every raccoon, every fox, every squirrel, the cattle on 1,000 hills, all the deer and elk and muskox and caribou, every bird in the mountains. Think about the eagle, falcon, raven, and grouse. And every creature of the field. I just took the lion, the zebra, elephant, wildebeest. God said, I own it all. Well, God, I got this little bit I can help somebody with. He said, good, because we're just caretakers of it for a little while. Benevolence and loving better. God cares about not necessarily how much we give, but how. James 2 and 17, if one of you says to him that is who lacks, doesn't have this and that, go and I wish you well, keep warm, well fed, hey, bro, God bless. Did you give me anything? Well, I gave him a high five. Well, good, but did that really help with the sandwich or no? But does nothing about his physical needs. What good is it? Matthew 25 and verse 40 that I cited 2 slides earlier. Whatever you did for one of the least brothers of mine, you did it for me. And so Jesus said, I take that, my words would be, I take that as a personal favor. You're helping my brother. Because you helped him, you helped me. We get to make a difference. And so if you would like to contribute, I'll just be out in the lobby afterward. And that's fine. If it doesn't work for you this time, do not worry about it. Yeah, but what if there's too much? Well, then they get a bit extra. What if there's less? One brother who couldn't be with us today said, whatever we lack, I'll make up. This person does not even have a house like the ordinary person here that lives in. He said, I'll just make it up. I said, well, how much? He said, use your judgment. I said, $20,000? He said, use your judgment. Make a good judgment. I just wanted you to know that it's just, this congregation is perhaps the most loving, giving one that I've known. And it's just a joy to be part of the family here. And so we get to ask ourselves, will we do anything if the Lord asks? 2 Corinthians 8, 1 and 5, regarding the Macedonian churches, Paul says, did not do as we expected, but gave themselves first to the Lord and then to us, in keeping with God's will. They're just saying, we're willing to help out however we can. And I like 1 Kings 8 and verse 61. Solomon said, let your heart therefore be wholly devoted to the Lord our God, to walk in his statutes and to keep his commandments as it is this day. What a joy it is to share this, because your giving attitude really impacts your children. They see, oh, here's how mom and dad did. They just had a great attitude. Christians, it's such a joy to be with you. If your attitude is, well, I'd like to be a Christian. I believe in Jesus Christ. I'm willing to repent of my sins. I'm willing to confess his name and that I am a believer and be buried in the waters of baptism. You got that opportunity this morning, because we're going to sing a song, Won't It Be Wonderful There? If you'd like to respond in any way, we'd be delighted in helping you. Vince, why don't you lead our line?